Orleans Humanist Perspective, presented by the New Orleans Secular Humanist Association, following a few principles of humanism.
We're committed to the use of science and reason for understanding the universe and for solving human problems. We're skeptical of untested claims of knowledge, but we're open to new ideas.
We are concerned with securing justice and fairness in society and in ending intolerance and discrimination. We are committed to the total separation of religion and government.
We affirm humanism as a realistic alternative to the theologies of despair and the ideologies of violence. We reject the concept of an afterlife and believe in living a full and rewarding life here and now.
We value and respect each individual's right to judge and lead their lives according to their own position, as long as it's respectful of other people, living in a free society.
We hope you enjoy today's program and others in the weeks to follow.
Hello again, and thanks for being here with us. I'm Harry Greenberger, the host for the show for a lot of years, as many of you know. My guest today is Lester Perryman, who represents the New Orleans Steering Committee of the national organization Human Rights Campaign.
Yes.
We have, I think, had been somewhat supportive of each other through the years, and certainly we have a lot of issues in common.
We do.
First, you might want to just tell us something about who Human Rights Campaign is, well, you know, what you do.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having us on here today. The Human Rights Campaign is the nation's largest lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender advocacy organization. We basically fight for fairness and equality for all families that live in our country.
Which, of course, this fairness for everyone
Exactly.
is what we do as well.
Exactly.
All right. Now, I'm going to talk about some of the issues that you are having to fight right now, which we are, of course, totally supportive of. Okay. And the big one, which has been national conversation on TV and I presume in clubs and homes and will continue to be, are the two issues that were recently heard by the United States Supreme Court. One of them being same-sex marriage, mm-hmm. And the other one being DOMA, which is the
Defense of Marriage
Act, mm-hmm. which the United States Congress passed, saying that marriage is between one man and one woman. Those two issues made their way up to the Supreme Court with the expectation that they would be found to be unconstitutional.
That's what we hope.
Tell us more about, and I have this clipping recently from the newspaper, and it says the Supreme Court has many options in those two cases. So what are some of the options? How might this come out?
There are a ton of options. Of course, we hope that the Supreme Court will see these issues. Prop 8, denying equal treatment to lesbian and gay couples under the law. So Prop 8 is a case out of California that involves it's two couples that are suing the state based for the Prop 8 that was passed in 2008. And what Prop 8 does is deny lesbian and gay couples the right to marry.
That proposition, which was passed by a vote of the people.
Exactly.
It reversed their prior approval of same-sex marriage. Is that correct?
Yes. So the California State Supreme Court had a case before Prop 8 was passed, that basically in that case they ruled that lesbian and gay couples are entitled under the California Constitution to marriage. Okay. And what the legislature did after that was basically put forth an initiative before the voters that allowed the voters to take that right back. And so the Proposition 8 case in the Supreme Court basically is going to decide if the voters have the right to do that or not. And
now, if the Supreme Court decides that bill that was passed or legislate whatever that was in fact in error, which says that in California same-sex marriage would still be valid, is that would happen there?
If the Supreme Court upholds the lower court's decision, which basically states that those marriages are valid, then yes, the state of California will.
So one outcome of the decision of the Supreme Court would be that same-sex marriage in California is valid.
Yes.
Does that, since it's in a federal court, does that then flow over to all of the other states, or is this strictly going to be a California matter?
It really depends on how the Supreme Court's going to rule on this. It depends on if the Supreme Court will have the guts to make this a nationwide issue. So the Supreme Court could say, okay, we respect California's decision to allow gay and lesbian couples to have access to marriage equality, and they can say that that only applies to California. Or they can say that any ban that prohibits same-sex couples from marrying is unconstitutional. And so it really depends. The Supreme Court can look at the standing issue, whether or not the proponents of Prop 8 have the ability to actually take that case before the court and argue on behalf of the state. The proponents of Prop 8, in my opinion, and in many opinion of other scholars, they have no fiduciary responsibility to the state of California or its citizens. So this is sort of this group of lawyers who took it upon themselves to fight on behalf of the state. So there's this confusion with the court right now saying, hey, if we let you guys come before us and argue this case on behalf of the state when you have no responsibility to the state or its citizens, can anyone else, if they're feeling that they're injured by something that the state passed, can anyone else come before us and argue on behalf of the state if the state doesn't want to defend that law? And so that's the confusion with the Supreme Court right now. The big issue is whether or not, on whether or not they're going to see this case.
Unfortunately, or maybe I would say unfortunately, marriage licenses are issued by states. You don't get a federal marriage license.
You do not.
Now, with the DOMA Act, which says marriage is between one man and one woman, and there are a number of states who said that same-sex marriage is approved in the state, there's a conflict.
There is.
And so some people say, well, this is a states' right issue, and the federal government should stay out of it, and each state should be able to make its own decision. But here is the problem. If you qualify in a state for a same-sex marriage, it doesn't qualify you for the advantages, the federal advantages that go to heterosexual married people. Major, serious advantages are not available to same-sex couples. What are some of those things that that they're deprived of?
Well, you're talking about 1,100 plus benefits. Here's a story. Well, let's say my mom and dad, they're married, they're living under one household, and so do my sisters and brothers, right? They have kids. If my dad dies, then my mom is entitled to any federal benefits that he's received to support our family. And that includes any Social Security income or any 401k plans, all that stuff. DOMA has an impact on that. Let's say two friends of mine, Debbie and Shannon, they've been partnered for 36 years. And let's just say that Debbie makes the most money. She's she brings home the bacon for the family. If something happens to Debbie, then there are a number of things that Shannon can't do that heterosexual couples can do. The first thing of that would be taxing on Debbie's estate. So right now, if my dad dies my mom could be exempted up to $500,000 of taxation, so she wouldn't have to worry about that much. If Debbie dies, though, Shannon would only be exempt from $250,000 of that. And so what that does is it creates a huge penalty on Shannon, and that's unfair. Exactly. Taxes. And that's not fair to Shannon, especially when she pays into our system her taxes, her fair amount of taxes, just like my parents do.
So we're talking about equal treatment.
Equal treatment under the law.
All right. Now, suppose the Supreme Court says DOMA is unconstitutional. What are those repercussions?
That's a complex issue, because if you live in a state that does not allow you to marry, then there are questions on what parts of DOMA applies to you. If you live in a state that allows you to get married, then we can only assume that you'll be entitled to all of those benefits that heterosexual couples
the federal
get.
benefits.
Yes, it's federal benefits.
You would think that without any further action, if a state has approved it, then automatically they're entitled to the federal benefits?
And there are some areas that the federal government, that the administration has to go through and iron out for these, but that's what we would assume.
Because in the, as I best understand all the federal laws, they're talking about what the spouse is entitled to. Mm-hmm. And what is a spouse? Is a spouse a wife of a man, or is a spouse one of a pair of two women? You know, what is a spouse?
Exactly. And when we talk about spouses and what spouses are entitled to, let's look at 401k plans. Yes. If my dad died, his 401k plan could be transferred to my mom, mm-hmm. and she could choose to defer her taxes on that until she's in a lower tax
as he
bracket.
Would have been able to.
Exactly. And that way she can afford to pay the taxes on that 401k plan. Debbie and Shannon, however, if Debbie dies and her 401k plan is set to go to Shannon, then Shannon doesn't have the option to...
She's got to pay taxes.
Exactly. So she's got to pay it up front. And that could be a large amount of money, because she can't qualify, or she won't be able to qualify to pay those taxes on that lower income bracket. So,
all right. Now, what are some of the other issues that HRC is presently involved with or concerned about?
Well, we're also concerned about discrimination in the workplace.
In the workplace.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right now, in the state of Louisiana, you couldn't be fired for being gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender. Louisiana being a right-to-work state, you can be fired for just about anything. And so what we are working on at the federal level is passing what we call the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, also known as ENDA. And what that will do is provide protections for people based on sexual orientation so that their employer cannot fire them for being LGBT. And that's one initiative. The other initiative that we're working on providing protections for children in school. So bullying is a big thing right now. You're seeing on TV where teenagers and younger kids are committing suicide because they're not able to be who they are in school. They're not confident. They don't feel safe. They've been bullied by their classmates. And so there's a Safe Schools initiative that we're trying to pass through Congress that will put these protections in place for kids based on their sexual orientation.
All right. Well, as I follow the news, there is not a very receptive Congress for those kinds of acts. What do you perceive as the possibility of either of those things getting through Congress?
Well, right now, with our current makeup of Congress, being that we have a Republican-controlled House, a Democratically controlled Senate,
And a refusal to compromise.
And a refusal to compromise. We don't know right now. And I'm hoping that our representatives will look at the children and the families that are being impacted by this. Put yourself in the shoes of a parent whose kid just committed suicide because they're being bullied by another kid at school. Imagine if that were your son or daughter. How would you feel? And surely you would want protections in place for your kid so that they don't have to come to this decision.
And what form of that protection, what would it take? I mean, what if they passed some legislation, how would it come down to the local schools? What would happen there?
Well, at the local school levels, teachers would have some form of training on how to prevent these things from happening. And what will be placed in harassment clauses, sexual orientation would be placed in these schools' harassment clauses, and basically prohibit schools from discriminating on students based on their sexual orientation, and putting in protections for students that are of LGBT or perceived to be LGBT to prevent these sort of situations from happening.
All right, so you're talking about federal action, but locally, couldn't there, shouldn't there be local movements to get to get the schools in your community to do those things without a federal law telling them that they can? They could do it now, couldn't they?
Oh, definitely. And we're working on a program with some schools in the area. We have a program at HRC called Welcoming Schools. And what we do with Welcoming Schools is we go in and we train teachers on how to respond to situations where, say, little Johnny comes up to you and as a teacher and says, hey, my dad says that it's wrong for Billy to have two mommies. Teachers aren't trained in college on how to respond to those sort of situations. So what do you do that creates a safe and inviting environment for that student in your classroom? And so we train teachers on how to respond in this situation. So that's Welcoming Schools. And so, there are programs like that are being pushed by other organizations with school administrators to create a safe environment for all students.
But you're still talking about a small number of schools.
Exactly. And it's tough to do that in Louisiana because there are laws that restrict what teachers can say when it comes to LGBT issues.
Louisiana is a very backward state, as we all recognize.
And it does not create a welcoming environment for students, and it impacts a student's ability to excel and achieve in their classrooms.
What other issues are you all concerned with these days?
We're also concerned about immigration issues. Heterosexual couples that are married or heterosexual citizens of the United States, if you marry someone who lives in another country, who's a citizen of another country, it's easier for you to have your partner come here and become a citizen of the United States. It's not the same for LGBT people because, once again, we have this DOMA thing that's hanging over our heads. And so DOMA, in a sense, can split up couples. If I'm married to my partner and he's from Mexico or something, he can't become a citizen of the United States as easy as it would be for my friend Jeremy and his wife Shannon. It just doesn't work the same because we have this thing that basically treats us different under the law, and we should all be treated equally.
That's a part of a major immigration issue, and apparently our Congress isn't able to do much about immigration in general. Now, let me just to really change the subject.
Sure.
Through the years, I've known about HRC, and I've gotten all the announcements about your wonderful annual banquets.
Uh-huh.
You got one that's coming up. Tell us something about that.
Well, you bet we have one coming up. It's going to be June 15th at the Hyatt Regency New Orleans. It's going to start at 6 o'clock p.m. And we have some great speakers that we're looking at. In the past, we've had Tipper Gore, For entertainment, we've had Wanda Sykes, Lily Tomlin, Patricia Clarkson, the daughter of Jackie Clarkson. Just last year, we had Joan Rivers.
In other words, you were a top-notch, first-scale kind of event.
We try to be. So.
Well, you are. You don't just try to. You are, and I presume you have fairly large audience.
We do.
And then when is the next one coming along?
It's June 15th.
June 15th.
It's a Saturday.
Well, we're not going to talk about right now what it would cost or how you would get tickets, but the public will get a chance to know about it.
Yes, the public will get a chance. You'll get invitations. You'll also have an opportunity to sponsor. You'll have an opportunity to donate to our wonderful silent auction. We've been known to have one of the best silent auctions in the city. So,
well, actually, years back, before I retired, and when I was with the Nahan Art Galleries on Royal Street, we donated art to your auction on a few occasions.
And thank you.
It's for a very worthwhile purpose.
Yes.
We still have a little bit of time, and so why don't you, if there's some things that you'd like to bring up, let's hear about them.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
Well, I suspect that there are other civil rights matters that do you actually go to court? Do you, like the ACLU, do you take issues to court?
We will provide an amicus brief on behalf of petitioners to the court. And I'm sure if we're involved in a situation, yes, we would directly go to court, but we basically support organizations such as Lambda Legal, and we're supporting AFER in the Prop 8 case. So, yeah, we basically provide legal briefs in support of...
For actions that these other organizations may take.
Exactly.
Are there some of those presently, before the courts that you're aware of?
There are a bunch. As you can imagine, there are LGBT citizens all throughout the country that are being discriminated against, that we are providing these briefs for. But in particular right now, we're really focusing on Prop 8 and DOMA. Those are the biggest things.
I realize that those are the big issues. But of course, there's another issue in New Orleans, and that has to do about the Science Education Act, which allows the teaching of creationism in a science class, which is not that much a civil rights issue, but it is certainly an important issue for people.
And it also finally straddles the line of separation of church and state.
Absolutely.
And it prevents us from teaching to students things that we have proven through science, things that are factual. And imagine, our kids getting an education that is on par with kids from other states. What's it going to be like when they go to university?
When they've been offered an opportunity to discredit evolution
exactly.
and global warming.
Exactly.
Now, I think it's hard to deny the scientific position regarding global warming. Now, you might question whether it's man-made, but the Louisiana Science Education Act allows teachers to bring in information to a science class questioning whether global warming or whatever they call climate change is actual. That leaves people giving up the scientific method, which says, show me your evidence. If you got the evidence that supports it, and no one has come up with the evidence that says that it's not so, then at least up till then, accept it.
And yes, and I'm not speaking on behalf of HRC for that, but I agree with you 100%. Yeah. But that's that's a similar argument that's before the courts right now. You have Justice Scalia basically saying, well, we don't know what the effects of what he calls deleterious parenting will have on children if same-sex couples will be allowed to get married. There's tons of evidence, tons of reports and briefs that were submitted to the court that provides Justice Scalia with this information, and he refuses to acknowledge it. And so my question would be, okay, then if we're talking about deleterious parents, let's look at heterosexual situations where these kids are born and they're thrown into an adoption system or foster care system, maybe because they were abused by their parents. Then we're looking to create a situation where children of same-sex couples feel that their families are valid. That if their parents can get married, they feel that their families are valid. And their parents are wonderful, warm, loving parents. They're, if I had to choose, I'd probably pick an LGBT parent. Look at how we treat our pets.
Well, someone on TV said that the heterosexual people don't want to get married anymore. They just live together, and it's the same-sex people who are the only ones who seem to want to be married.
And if you look at the data, I believe it's less than 50% of heterosexual couples that are getting
stay
married.
Together.
Exactly. Yeah. Versus friends like my friends Shannon and Deb who've been together for 36 years, and I don't understand why they can't allow them
Is
to
the
get
New
married.
Orleans Steering Committee of HRC, is that a membership organization?
You can be a member. You do not have to be a member to get involved in our cause.
But you do have
We do have
membership.
memberships available at various different levels. And so I won't go into the specific of those because that
Okay, all
includes.
right. Well, I understand, our organization, we have members, but anyone who wants to come to our meetings, anyone who wants to get involved, they're welcome.
We have meetings every third Wednesday of the month. That's open to our steering committee. And we also have subcommittee meetings that you can get involved in, including diversity, education, political outreach, all of those areas.
All right. Well, our time is up. Pleasure having you here.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Folks, thanks for watching us again. And come join us as often as you can.